Yay. Welcome back to our trip to Israel Bible study. We're going to actually probably wrap it up this week. Hopefully you'll find it to be very interesting, as we're going to largely be talking about Petra and just a few other places today. So we're going to kind of be finishing up, tying up all the loose ends. So let us begin with a prayer and we'll get started. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, and thank you for this opportunity to learn more about the Holy Land and the area around it, Lord. We thank you for all the many blessings you've given us, especially for sending your Son to come and live among us in this land and to be our Lord and Savior. In his name we pray. Amen. Okay, so last week we kind of finished up talking about Jerusalem, and we went on and we talked a little bit more about the history of Israel a little bit after the time of Jesus in Jerusalem. So we talked about what happened with Paul, and we talked about his trip to Caesarea. We talked a little bit about Masada and the Jewish Revolution. And so what we've got to talk to a little bit more about today as we wrap it up is we're going to be talking a little bit about the areas that are around the nation of Israel, and a little bit of what goes on there. So one of the main and most interesting points I wanted to show to you today is the city of Petra. I don't know if you've ever heard of the city of Petra, but here it is on our map. I need my cane. Yeah, I've got to have my cane. Okay, good. This is my cane in case I need it to kind of walk around. No, not really. It's just I need a pointer. And I'm too short to point at the TV, so laser pointers don't work on television, so that didn't work. So, city of Petra, right out here in the modern country of Jordan, just outside of Israel's border. Okay, why does Petra matter? Well, if we take a look at the ancient trade routes, which is where all the big monetary cities are, where most of your battles are going to be fought, they often follow the ancient trade routes. So if we look from about the 3rd century BC to the 2nd century AD, okay, roughly the time before and at Christ and immediately after, these are the major trade routes through the Middle East. You'll notice we've got Egypt over here. Okay, we've got one major trade route, the Highway of the Sea, the King's Highway, goes right up on down the coast through the area where the Philistines once lived, through Gaza, and up along this way. We've got trade routes that go through the middle of what we call Israel, up the Jordan Valley and up the other side. And right here is Petra. Okay? What do you notice about Petra when it comes to all these trade routes? It's right in the center. Yeah, it's a major trading hub in the ancient trade world. And in fact, Israel generally, if you look at Israel generally, the main trade, and you don't really get a sense of this from this map, that's the only downside is, okay, these trade routes that go down here into what we call Saudi Arabia today, or the Arabian Peninsula, are relatively minor. Very few people actually live down there. That's the desert, that's the middle of nowhere. There are trade routes that go that way, but these are relatively insignificant. The big trade routes come up and around what we commonly call the Fertile Crescent, up through Israel, up to the river Euphrates, and back down into Babylon proper, or continuing on up into Asia Minor and modern-day Turkey. Those are where the major trading routes are, and Petra is right on the crossroads of all of those things.
Is it still?
It is not really a major trading center anymore. Petra is pretty much the middle of nowhere today. And you'll see why here in just a minute. Okay, so Petra. Okay, so here we've got Petra. Now, I want to start up here in the I Heart Petra. There's the big sign. Great place for the tourists to take spots. You notice everything's in English. That's nice of them. That's not their native language there in Petra. Petra's in the country of Jordan. What do the people in Jordan speak? Jordanian? No. Good guess. Arabic. Yeah, the predominant language there in Jordan is Arabic. But all of their tourist stuff is in English, which is nice when you're from America. We speak English. Right? Okay, on your way to Petra, as you leave out of Israel here, and you head along the ancient trade routes, which is where the highway is, you come across the mountain of Aaron. Anybody know what the mountain of Aaron might be? Any guesses? Who's Aaron? Aaron is Moses' brother. And the mountain of Aaron might be where Aaron is rumored to have been buried. Okay, did Aaron make it into the promised land? No. Okay, the Israelites, they're out wandering in the wilderness. They disobey God. They don't go invade the promised land. And God says that you are all going to die out in the wilderness except for two people. Two people of that current generation get to go. Who are the two? Anybody remember? Trivia question. Joshua is one of them, and Caleb is the other. Caleb and Joshua. Moses is not. Aaron is not. Miriam is not. Okay, all of the leadership of Israel, the family of Moses, they don't all get to go. Joshua and Caleb are the two. So, along the way to Petra, this is part of the area where the Israelites are wandering out in the wilderness. Okay, when we talk about the Israelites out in the wilderness, this area that we're talking about is that same general area. That right there is the mountain of Aaron. Do we know for sure if it's really the mountain of Aaron? No. But that is what local tradition holds, that right there is the mountain of Aaron. What do you notice about the mountain of Aaron? Yeah, a lot of rock. Do you see a lot of trees, grass, lush vegetation? No. No. Okay. You're getting used to that by now. This is what the countryside looks like. This is very near Petra. This is just on the outskirts of Petra. Okay? Does it look like a densely populated metropolis? No. No. But they do have goats. They do have goats. Anyway, okay, good. Now, this is the main entryway into Petra. We'll get back to that in just a minute. Okay, so that's Petra. Now, before we dive into Petra proper, I thought it would be helpful if I showed you a map. Now, I'm not going to cover the whole map. It's not really important that you know it, other than to just realize that when we go to talk about Petra, Petra is down in a crack in a rock. Okay, it's in a very deep canyon is where the ancient city of Petra lies. And so what's going to happen is we're going to start out here at what's called the Petra Visitor Center. This is sort of the modern city of Petra, which is up on top of a hill. It's a very small, primitive community there. And we're going to walk down this little road. And as we go down the road, we're going to hit the treasury first as we go down the canyon, down to the ravine. The ravine's going to ultimately open up, and we're going to get the rest of the city down in the bottom. Okay, so Petra, most of the cities that we have talked about all through Israel are built where? They're all built on top of the mountains. Remember that? I mean, we talked about Megiddo, and we talked about Bet Shan, and we talked about all these places, Jerusalem even. They're all built on the top of the hill. Petra is just the opposite. It's going to be built in the bottom of the canyon. And we'll see why here in just a minute. But there's a lot going on here. There's a lot to the city of Petra. Okay? So, as we get into Petra there we are. We're walking from the town of Petra, here in the background, there's the town of Petra, down this little dirt road into what looks like nothingness. I mean, we're going out for a hike in the middle of the desert. You can't see it at all.
And how hot is it down there in the canyon?
Actually, down in the canyon it's relatively cool. It's relatively cool down in the canyon. And you're going to understand that in just a second. I'll come back to that. But that's a great question. Out here where we're walking, it's hot. Okay, and it's not summertime. Again, it's like late October.
It's like now.
Yeah.
It's like a year ago.
It was like a year ago now. Not a cloud in the sky, beautiful, but it's still hot there. I would say as we're walking right there, it's probably 95 degrees, something like that. Pretty warm. No, not desperately hot, but pretty warm. Okay. And this is what it looks like in the area around there. What do you see living there in the caves and such? We've got goats. We've got caves. We've got caves all over the place. The people still use the caves as their homes. Okay, a lot of the people live in the caves. They have their animals in the caves. Okay, when I say primitive, I mean, I'm talking live in a cave, primitive. Okay, these are the Bedouins out there. Okay. So this is not for show. This is like somebody's house right here. Okay, good. Okay, so now we're heading towards Petra. We're heading towards Petra. And we've got a divided highway as you head down there. You've got the highway here. This is for the horses. You know, this is the high-speed rail, the horses. And this is the, this is the local lanes here for the walking. That's right. Okay, this is what, divided highway in Jordan looks like. No, it's not quite that bad. But that's what we've got going on there. Okay? And I also give you this picture to just give you a sense of what does the area just outside of Petra look like. Because when I start to show you Petra, if I don't show you this first, you won't believe me. Okay? We are very near Petra right here. What'd you say, Rachel? We're probably half a mile maybe from Petra, from the center of town. We're half a mile away. Okay?
Can I ask you something?
Yes, jeez.
Who are the two women who are in the picture?
Who are the two women in the picture? I have no idea who that woman right there is. This is your aunt. Hopefully you know her. That's your Aunt Karen.
I was actually more asking about the second one, the left.
That is a lady that was in our tour group with us who we were friends with. Her name is Joni. Okay? No. She was hanging out with us. She was a friend of ours. So she's in some of the pictures on purpose. Okay. So as we get a little bit closer, we're starting to now see some things in the side. What do you see here in the side of this rock? There's some carvings, right? There's something carved in the rock. That's not a natural rock formation, yes? Yeah, they've...
I was going to say, didn't we just see that in the Indiana Jones? Yeah, it looks like.
Looks very familiar.
No, you haven't got to that part yet. You're a little ahead of us, but yeah, these are the mausoleums outside of the city of Petra. So they have carved into the side of the rock their burial tombs, which shouldn't surprise us. Where did we say Jesus was buried? In a cave that had been carved out of the side of a rock hill. Okay, this same time frame, same part of the world, same sort of thing going on. We're carving tombs now in the side of rocks. Okay, that's what's going on because we're still outside the city. This is now, we're going to begin our descent into where Petra is. Okay, so now, rather than a half mile away, probably a quarter of a mile from Petra, this is the main highway into Petra. We're going to start going down into this canyon. Okay? Very steep walled canyon. Would you say it's pretty wide or pretty narrow for a canyon? Pretty narrow. Pretty narrow. Okay? This is the main way. Main gate right here. Heading down into Petra. Okay, good. Now we've gone a little bit further. Now we're still in the main highway into Petra. What do you notice about the canyon now? Yeah. Very deep. Very narrow. I don't remember where we're standing right here exactly what that vertical elevation is, but I believe it's around 800 foot. So you've got an 800-foot vertical wall on both sides, and the canyon's probably 20 foot wide. So you asked, Nancy, is it hot down there? And the answer is no, it's not hot down there because why? The canyon is so deep and it is so narrow that you don't get very much sunlight down there, so it doesn't get really hot. It actually stays cool, like being in a cave. You step into a cave, it's cool. So even though we're not full on in a cave, we're so narrow and we're so deep, it's nice and cool down in there. It's probably a good reason why the people wanted to live down in there. You saw what the country around this looks like, but if we go down in this deep canyon, it's nice and cool. Yes, for sure. Now, you'll notice right here along the wall, there's something little indescript right here. There's a notch in the wall. Any idea what that could be for? There's also one on the other side over here. Executing criminals. No. What's that? A water trap. Yeah, exactly. That's what you're on the right. That's a water diversion. That is exactly what that is. So what happens, it's very dry here. It's a lot like Masada. You don't get very much annual rain, but the little bit of rain you do get tends to come in very hard, very fast rains that immediately wash off because it's a desert. The ground's as hard as a rock. So what do? When you do get those big rains, you divert the rains into places where you can store the water. And so that's what we've done. We have made channels all the way down both sides of the wall that you bring the water to the channels. You're going to run that water down those channels into places in Petra where you can store the water. So those are water storage channels to catch the rain runoff when you do get rain.
From back in Jesus' time?
Yep, from pre-Jesus' time even. Yep. So that's what it looks like up close. You know, it's just a little water channel. Runs all the way down as we're going down the canyon. So it all runs downhill into the water storage chambers. Okay, we have got our first glimpse now of Petra proper. So we're walking out of the canyon and we're about to hit the city. And this is our very first glimpse of the city as we get through there. You can, for an enormous sum of money, get a donkey to pull you in a little cart like this if you want to go down there. It's a little bit faster, but extremely bumpy. I mean, I watched those people as they rode by in these little carts, and I mean, they're like, dum, 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 dum. I mean, they're holding on to both arms, and they're like, we paid good money for this. I mean, you know. It didn't seem like a great idea to me, but you get more, you get paid per the trip, so I mean, you get that donkey moving. Okay. So I'd avoid the donkey if it was, if you ever go there. Yeah, don't ride the cart. Okay, so we step out of the canyon and immediately it opens up into this great big open area. Now what I give you this picture to show you is a few things. Number one, that we went from this incredibly narrow canyon to now we've opened up. We're still deep underground. I mean, you can see just how tall these canyon walls are. I don't even have the top even in the picture. In the walls, we have carved out the buildings of the city of Petra are carved into the rock walls themselves. They don't build. Like, you don't go down there with a bunch of wood and build a wooden structure. Instead, you carve your building out of the face of the rock. And there are multiple stories. You can see there are people up here on this platform. There are people walking up here, people walking up there. Okay, it's big. It opens up. Here's another kind of picture of what it looks like when it opens up into the fullness of Petra. Now I'm standing up several stories high. Looking down, this is the main street as it goes through Petra. You can see the carved buildings. There are multiple stories. You got the downstairs, you got the upstairs buildings, all carved out of the rock of the walls of the canyon.
Was Petra constructed or formed before the Iron Age?
Petra begins in the Bronze Age, and then it continues on into the Roman period. Yeah, so what is so neat about Petra is an entire city carved into the side of the rocks. They didn't build any of it with conventional construction. All of it is carved directly into the side of the rocks. Okay. We've got, what kind of religious practices do we have going on in the city of Petra? Who lives in Petra? Anybody know who lives in Petra? The Muslims don't live there yet. The Muslims haven't come into existence yet. No, Babylonians aren't there. They're over in Babylon. They like their nice fertile plains. They don't want to come out and live in the desert. The Bedouins live there today. In the 1st century AD, the Romans conquer Petra. Okay? The great Roman general Trajan is going to come, and he's going to conquer the people who live. He's going to conquer Petra. He's going to make it a province of the Roman Empire. It is going to stay a province of the Roman Empire basically until the Roman Empire in the east falls apart, at which time Petra is largely abandoned and becomes the middle of nowhere, and ultimately the guys with their, couple goats move in. The Bedouins take it over. But the Romans, although they're going to conquer and expand Petra, they're not the ones who build it, though. The Romans aren't the ones who originally build Petra. Does anybody know? They're a group called the Nubians. They are an Iron Age culture that live in the wilderness area here of Jordan. Basically what in the Bible is largely called the land of Midian, or the Midianites. You get that a lot in like Moses' time. They'll talk about the Midianites. But basically, after the Midianites, these are the folks who build this place till they get conquered. So these Midianites and the Nubians are pagan peoples, much like the Canaanites. Okay, they're interested in worshiping their local cultic deity. And so, where do they do that at? They're going to do that at what they call the high places of Petra. Now, does that word high places, does that ring any bells? Have we heard that anywhere before? Jason? The brain? No? Man, we even stumped Jason. Yes!
That was his memory. That means we didn't hear it.
We didn't hear it. In his defense. We've never heard this. Remember back in your stories of the judges. Remember the judges of Israel. The Israelites are told by Joshua, we're going to go in, we're going to conquer the promised land, and we are to drive out all of the Canaanites, all the inhabitants of Canaan. Why? Because of their detestable practices, the way they reject God and all of his true teachings. Do they do that? No, they do not. They don't obey God's command. They don't do that. So the Canaanites are still there. So in the time of the judges, we have lots of problems with this, right? We run into problems. What are the problems? The problems are the people of Israel begin to copy the practices of the people around them. One of the things that they copy is what they call the worship in the high places. They have the Asherah poles and the worship in the high places. Okay? We find this a lot in Old Testament Israel, this talk about worship in the high places. Well, what goes on in the worship at the high places is largely human sacrifice. Okay, we've got human sacrifice will go on the top of the mountain, usually asking the gods or the cult deity that they believe in for things like rain, a good harvest, the fruitfulness of the earth, these sorts of things. That's what's going on. That's what we have going on in Petra as well. Now, like everything else we did while we were in Israel, we had like 30 seconds to see everything you wanted to see, right? We've talked about this before. Petra was a little bit better than that, but it was similar. And I saw that, hey, there's a trail up to the high places. That would be really neat to go see what they have up there. Well, when you look at the trail, and I'm going down a rabbit trail, but it's kind of a cool story. You look at the trail, and it looks like it just goes up, up to a little plateau up here, and I figure, I'll just get up there, look around, it'll be really great. Well, you get up to where that is, and where that is a switchback, which goes up another big steep incline to another switchback, to another one, to another one. And I told Rachel that I would be back in no more than I think 15 minutes. So I got up to the switchback and there was a bunch more and I thought, well, I've come this far, but I've used up 5 of my 15 minutes already. So I take off running up the mountain. And I run and I run and I run and I about have a heart attack. And then I keep running some more. Ultimately, I do get up to the top of the high places. Okay? It is way up there. So, this is the trail picture of the trail. I started off, that's the second story of Petra proper, way down there. I run up this mostly staircase, up this narrow canyon, all the way up till you get to the Temple of the High Places. And that's right here. Okay, this is the Temple of the High Places. This is where they do their human sacrifice. And I have these people that are up there. They probably died from the hike up there. But look at them. This is the altar where we sacrifice people. Look at this person laying up on the altar. They have no idea. Those people, they had no idea what they were looking at. They had no idea that people were sacrificed on that altar. But anyway, that was nice of them to be my prop for me. Okay, so you've got this basically, this room. It's probably about 50 foot by 50 foot. It's a temple on top. You know, we're all the way up on top of the ridge. Remember we talked about how Petra, we went down, down, down this canyon. And I said you got these vertical walls that are 900 foot sheer cliffs. The high places are up on the top. See, we're up on the top. We can see the mountains all around. This is where they do their religious cultic practices of Petra. They're pagans. Pagans, okay? Anyway, it's pretty interesting. There's a lot of minute detail carved into the rocks that give us indications of what they did and where. There's like bench seating around carved into the rock where you can see where you've got an area where the priest would be and he would do his ritualistics, and then you'd have the people that were basically the congregation would sit. You'd have a little holding area where the person who was going to be sacrificed was held, and then they'd bring them out to this altar and they'd do their business. And then there was like there's like a catchment bowl then that would catch the blood from the human sacrifice, and this blood was basically I don't know what the word I'm trying to say is. It's like a holy blood that then they would use for all sorts of special religious practices from these sacrifices. So there's a whole cultic ritual that goes on with this. Okay? These people are not Jewish, not Christian. Okay?
Were they criminals, or how did they get their sacrifices?
You know, the information on how they got their sacrifices here is sketchy. We could infer from what was done in other cultures in the Near East at that time that typically they were not like criminals. They were usually young people, often of relatively high social standing. So these might be like the son of the magistrate, or the daughter of the general, or someone of usually not of royal standing, but of some social standing, that it was considered an honor generally to be one of the sacrifices. I say that as a generalization, though, that I don't know that about Petra specifically, but in the Near East commonly at the time, that was where they came from. Okay, so that's the high places of Petra. So, coming back down, you can see now here we have got more of the town. So these are the houses. Okay, these are the houses where the people live in Petra. There are multiple stories, apartment, high rises, first century. Okay, so what you got here is you got you've got the house carved out of the rock. You go inside the house, and you have anywhere from usually about 1 to 3 rooms inside there. All of it has been carved directly out of the rock. And you've got all of the things that a local house would have. All of them typically have basically a fire, a place where they would have their fire, and you would have a place usually where they kept some animals, and then the main room where the people were. Okay, that's kind of the common house there in Petra. And you can see the scale of it. I mean, you can sort of get a sense of the scale of this place. It's big. It's big. You can kind of get, you can see the mountains around. What do you notice? The same thing about all the mountains. We're out. I mean, this is the desert. I mean, this is about as desert gets out here. Even in there, I mean, there's a couple, there's a little, sagebrush or something looking there, but that's about it. Jason, you know who that guy is?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's you.
No.
No. You and Uncle
Yeah, okay, good. No, no. He started with me going up to the trail to the high place. He wasn't into the running part. He was not up for that part. Okay. What do we have here in the city of Petra? The amphitheater. Yeah. You got to have an amphitheater in the ancient world. It just isn't going to work without one. So yeah, even here, same thing. Carved out of solid rock, you have an amphitheater.
Are those the box seats up there?
That's for Jason. That's where he
Yeah.
has the cameras.
That's right. That's the sound effects dude back up there or something. Yeah. And then here where I'm standing, you can't really see it in this picture, but I'm on stage. It's a typical Roman stage. We've got Roman columns looking like any typical amphitheater. The amphitheater is added by the Romans, as far as we can tell. Okay, because the Romans don't go anywhere without building, the things that Romans have to have. And you have to have a theater. I can only imagine, to Rick's question earlier, how much work it must have been to carve out of solid rock that amphitheater.
The whole engineering behind it, like you're in a cave and you use fire. Now, how do you keep from dying every night from carbon monoxide poisoning or smoke inhalation or something like that? I mean, it's just the way they did that out of solid rock.
It's a pretty incredible place. It really is. It is pretty neat kind of place. Okay, so then we have, in addition to the houses and the places of worship, we have some of the civic buildings as well. Okay, so this is one of our civic structures that we went up and saw. Rachel, you remember what that is? No. Okay, good. Any of you other Petra people who've been there, remember what that thing is?
Treasury.
Nope, that's not the treasury.
Oh, that's the treasury.
You knew it wasn't the treasury.
That's right. You walked into the treasury. It must be City Hall.
Yeah, okay, so what that thing is, actually, believe it or not, that is the main granary in town. That's the main granary in town. So that is a civic structure here in Petra, which, given how, desolate the landscape is, being in control of the food supply is very important. So this is the main granary in town. So we kind of have the main administrative part, and then in the underneath part is where all of essentially the grain silos are all carved out of the rock up underneath there. So that's what that is.
They went and bought it someplace, called it in, and stored it there.
Because we're on the trade routes. Remember, this is the center of trade.
Yep.
Remember, we showed you the trade routes. Now, why is Petra the center of trade? Remember, I told you the main trade happens essentially between Egypt and Babylon. Those are really the sort of, that's like Dallas and Houston to us, okay? Those are the big city centers. There's two ways to get between them. One takes you through Israel all the way up to the north, around, up to the top of the Euphrates River and back down. Okay, that's the main highway, what we call the Fertile Crescent. Okay, that's the main way. The other way you can get there, the shortcut way, is to come through Petra, through the desert, and go kind of more straight there. Okay, those are kind of the two main ways. So, and Petra, in some ways, bisects both. So as you come out of Egypt, unless you're going on the coast is one way to go. But if you don't go along the coast, you come up and you hit Petra, and Petra's sort of the intersection between, are you going to go the shortcut or are you going to go the main highway? Okay, so lots of trade going through Petra. Good. Okay, so here's a picture of one of those big openings. Okay, just to give you, a sense of scale of how big it is. This is a big cave that's been hollowed out. It's not a natural cave. I mean, you can see it's a nice square opening, square top, square walls. That's been engineered, designed, built out of the rock. Okay. Okay. Now, you Indiana Jones people, here's your moment. There it is, the Holy Grail.
Kind of had
You're not allowed
we
to go
saw
in.
it last night. It was a movie like what?
You're not allowed to go in. They won't let you in.
Yeah.
That's where the ark is held and all that stuff.
Oh, we've been in there.
Nope.
Apparently they've been in.
We've been in there.
Nope. They wouldn't let us in
Yeah,
there.
ripped off, so you couldn't-
They had a.
Jeff was in there when he was 3 months.
Yeah, when I was a baby.
He's been in there. Well, when I'm
He's,
There's something he did.
That's right.
he's been in there.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the main treasury building. When I remember when I first showed you that glimpse of when you first come out of that super narrow canyon, the very first thing you see when you come out of the canyon is this, the treasury of Petra. That is a Roman building, and basically, it's the treasury. That's where the money is. So why would the treasury be right front and center? What is Petra? Petra is a trading city. It's a trading center city. So the very first thing you get is you get the treasury right there. It's very impressive as you come out of that narrow canyon, and the whole thing just out of nowhere just opens up, and you have this huge treasury building there in front of you. Okay? This is more of the canyon, mausoleums. I put this picture in here to say, even to this day, they don't really know the full extent of the city of Petra. And the reason I say that is because we have the ground level, and it is clear that there is more under the ground. There is lower levels of Petra. So although we have multiple layers that we can see that are exposed, it's clear there are levels below it. So you can see, like right here, the ground level is about midway through the middle of that level. Okay? There are unearthed levels below that existed in antiquity. So we don't even know for sure how deep it goes because it's never been excavated all the way down.
It was 2 stories and they were digging down into the third. And we were the second, they had already done it, the third and fourth, and they were digging into the fifth level. Now, how big is this building really? And that was 10 years before they went.
Yeah.
And logistics part of me, I'm thinking is, okay, water rolls downhill.
Yes.
Where are they at? Bottom of the hill.
They're at the bottom of the hill. That's exactly what's going on. So this place was, as I told you, it was largely went into disuse at the end of the Roman period. So basically what happens is the water runs down into the bottom, and the silt has collected, over the centuries and built, and been filling up the bottom of the canyon. And they have,
So that treasury wasn't at ground level when it was built.
no, it probably was. It's just that the ground level has come up, and that they have added stories over the years to go up. Yep. It's just like a modern high-rise city. You run out of prime real estate at ground level, so the only place to go is up. Yeah, start building vertical.
What did it look like inside?
Well, it's kind of empty, kind of like, I mean, there wasn't any apartments. There were some Roman columns there in the beginning, but it's just a
It's just a room.
I say, in the movie, okay, just in the movie, they had like a crusader soldier carving in the wall and all that.
That's fictitious. Everything you get inside there in Indiana Jones is fictitious. Okay? When you kind of get the sense that they're in this canyon, and you get the treasury. But when in the movie they go inside, that's all fictitious. Okay? But they would have, there's nothing left in there. It would have been furnished. It would have been furnished in typical Roman furnishings.
I just wondered if there were any wall carvings.
time there was,
No.
there truly was no park, there was no guide, there was no people, just the people that lived there, that were just, and so there was nobody to tell us even what it was. When we went, and by the time the second time was, they had created
That's because when you went there, the dirt was like brand new. Oh, man.
Okay.
There was nobody even living around there. Yeah, okay.
Ones were living there, so if there was a curtain, if there was a rug or something hanging down, you just didn't go in.
Don't go in there because that's somebody's house.
But
Yeah.
you could just walk around.
And the Bedouins they still do live up in there.
And you could go down there by donkey. We rode a donkey down there. That was their little earning their money was. So we rode the donkey. They went in carts. But they're Arab guys. And I have Jeff one night. Tell me how they know about that. And they weren't going to touch a woman. So I almost got on and almost fell off. And he was just going to let me fall. Trying to get out of this. Can't touch a woman. Even with a baby, holding a baby. Oh.
See, I almost died right then and there. Great.
Fell on your head.
That's right. Okay, and again, this is another good thing of the city of Petra, and you can just see it winds through here, just through the natural canyon, through the natural ravine. All this hubbub down here, these are Bedouins selling trinkets. I guess is probably the best way to describe it. And so they're just makeshift little tent structures. They will set them out during the day. They'll collect them and put them back in their caves at night. And they're the local Bedouins who live there. Yeah, again, nothing like, no official tour guide or, nothing like that. Nothing like that. Okay, city of Petra. A few more. Here's some of the wares that they have. You can see them kind of around, some donkeys, different things. Pretty neat place, bottom line. And when you get to the entrance, we found
Hey, Jeff's got a bookstore.
my bookstore is there.
That's because in northern Saudi Arabia, there's a whole tribe of Jeffries. Oh, there is. Yes, there is.
That's right. And this is, remember our map, Petra is just in the north, just in the south of Jordan, just in the north of Saudi Arabia. So we have an entire tribe there, and they have, this is the modern tourist shop. Not just the little Bedouin people. These are the big time, people.
That's the reason the Israelis really kind of raise an eyebrow at Jeff.
That's right.
They weren't in Saudi Arabia.
That's right.
I didn't know that at the time. I knew that the Saudis down there. And when he was born, the Saudi commander came up to me he was about 3 months old and says, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You brought us a whole bunch of gifts because there was a whole tribe of Jeffries in Northern Saudi Arabia. So we had named
Good.
a Saudi name. I wouldn't have named it. So I want to say that.
That's cool. I mean, that's the neat information.
Yep. So, any questions you got about Petra before we move on from Petra?
I just can't get over the fact that it's very good thing. I mean, everything on this is just amazing.
20 years later.
Which part?
Where, like they have the big walkway and everything, and they had columns
Mm-hmm.
and that stuff.
Did they have writing on the columns? Most of the Roman columns have the history of the.
No, not very much. I don't know if they either didn't write it or if it just didn't survive. But there's very little writing there found in Petra. It's a little bit unusual. You don't have the typical Roman mosaics very much there. You don't have a lot of the typical writing there. And we don't know, we don't really know why you don't have all that I mean, some of the stuff is typically Roman. I mean, you can see the columns and the amphitheater and all that, but a lot of the stuff is not typically Roman. So,
Is it really a crescent-shaped canyon?
It didn't look that
No.
crescent shaped. No, it's like a
That
big.
was the thing in India.
Yeah.
The crescent, a canyon of the crescents or something like that.
yeah, no.
It's big and circular, and then it kind of winds in and out, like if you've ever seen a canyon.
Yeah.
Why-
Well, and if you imagine the movie Indiana Jones now, in the movie they show you that canyon of the Crescent Moon. What do you notice about that canyon? That is a canyon out on the plain. It's a plain. There's a plain with a canyon running right through it. What does it outside of Petra look like? It's mountainous. Okay, again, that part is fictitious. And no, we didn't find the Holy Grail while we were there.
Of course not, it was lost in the crevice in the ark.
It's still down there, Rick. You could go find it.
Didn't go see the knight. Go visit the knight.
I wanted to go talk to the knight, but we didn't have time. Okay, so we also went and we saw the Red Sea a little bit. Just kind of, I call this kind of like the appendix of the trip, okay? Because we also went and we saw the Red Sea. Took a boating trip out there on the Red Sea. There's people swimming on the Red Sea. This is the main. This is the only harbor that Israel, of course, has on the Red Sea. So it's a big harbor town. So you've got some of the big ports stuff. It's a big tourist town. I would say it's like Israel's Las Vegas. So you got like the big resorts down here. So you can see there it is there behind us. That is the town of Eilat. That is the town of Eilat. It is a big recreational center, not only for Israel, but internationally as well. So you got a lot of Russians will come there. Turks will come here. A lot of folks come to the town of Eilat down there on the Red Sea. And the reason I say it's Vegas, it's a lot like Vegas, not only in the sense that you have these big resorts, but it's the middle of the desert, but it has a beach. So you've got all of the sort of nice, dry heat kind of thing going on, where it's not humid at all, but you're right there on the water. So it's
Yeah, but it's a little point though, And
Yeah.
Jordan on one side and Egypt on the other, but, in a lot, it's like a Western resort.
yes.
Go across the border to Jordan one way or to Egypt the other way, and you're back in the third world.
You're in a third world country.
That's why everybody wants to go here, because it's a first world city resort.
Yes.
And a couple miles away, you're back in third world poverty.
It's a third world country.
That's amazing. The water looks blue like the Caribbean.
Yeah, the water here is very, very clear.
Not at sunset.
So the Red Sea, of course, is infamous for its scuba diving, because of the clarity of the water and such. Absolutely. So it's extremely clear. Up here in the top right-hand side, that is also out in the Red Sea. And what that is the palace fortress of Saladin that we talked about last week briefly. Remember we talked about how it was in vogue when King Herod and other people to build yourself a sort of palace fortress somewhere that if things really headed south, you had somewhere to run off to so no one would chop off your head. Saladin built his. There it is right there. It's on a little bitty rock in the middle of the Red Sea. So that, it would be very difficult to conquer.
So do they know where Moses parted it at?
No.
They don't have a spot where they say, this is where.
No Moses parting spot. That's a very controversial question. Even among theologians will say, well, not the exact spot, but even in general, where did Moses cross the Red Sea? There's kind of three general areas that are considered. There's like a sort of a northern one, a middle one, and a southern one. No, not really. Not really, because we didn't go down that part of Egypt. But I myself am more of a center or southern person. Basically, the northern one is for the people who don't believe. Okay, the non-believers believe he crossed in the northern one because the northern one isn't crossing the sea. In the northern one, it's more like walking across a wetland. Okay, that's for the people that are like, cross the Red Sea. Yeah, right. He didn't do that. So they all want to propose. He didn't really cross the Red Sea. He crossed a little wetland and called it the Red Sea. Okay?
Just got stuck in the mud.
Yeah, that's right. And the Egyptians just didn't know a wetland when they saw one or something, of those along those lines. Okay? And then the southern two are, hey, it could have been here, it could have been there. And they're basically lining up with where some of basically the mountain passes are. Because you look at the geography and you say, okay, you're going to march 1 million people through this region. They had to go somewhere that you could walk. And so the other two basically line up with where is there a passage through the rocks that they pretty much had to walk through. But you don't really know which one. You don't have enough detail to know which one. Here's up close of Saladin's fortress, again, just out there in the Red Sea. That was the best my iPhone could do as we drove by on the bus. Sorry, it's a little grainy.
Is that
But-
under controversial? Who owns it?
No. You can see they're flying an Egyptian flag. That's clearly Egypt's. No. We also went to the Dead Sea. Okay? The Dead Sea is here. This is us floating in the Dead Sea. You cannot drown, I don't think, in the Dead Sea, even if you wanted to.
Even I can float.
Everyone can vote.
Anyone can float. You can't not float. I mean, you can.
What they tell me in normal water.
No.
Drown, but they'd find your body fast.
I mean, look at this person with their legs way up out of the water like that. They're in probably 20 foot of water right there. Okay, try to do that in your swimming pool and just see how that works. Okay, it is so salty. The water is so dense that it just buoys you up. You can't swim under the water. I tried, just because.
Because they said you couldn't.
Yeah, because they're like, you can't do it. I'm telling you, you can't do it. You can't. You have too much buoyancy. You know, it's like putting on like 3 life jackets and trying to swim, down. You're so buoyant, you can't. I didn't put it in here because we didn't do it, but there's famous pictures of people. They'll go out in the middle of the Red Sea and they'll take a newspaper and they'll read it. Because you can sit on the water and up high enough to hold a newspaper and read it. That's how much.
That's almost worth going to. One place on the planet
If you
Earth.
ever do though, we've got some warnings for you.
Yeah. The one thing, though, that I did not consider was, again, what makes it so buoyant? What did I say makes it so buoyant? Why is the Dead Sea so buoyant? Because it's so salty. It's got so many salts and brines in it. It's more than just, table salt, but what we call mineral salts are in this water. It is hypersalinated. What happens when something becomes hypersalinated? Which means it has so much salt in it that the water cannot possibly hold any more salt.
It all sinks to the bottom.
Yeah, it calcifies on the bottom. So the whole bottom of the Dead Sea is a giant salt crystal. It's beautiful. It's also very painful to walk on. It is very painful to walk on. So although you are buoyant when you first step in and it's only this deep, you go, ow, that really hurt. And then you take the next step and you go, ow, again. And you go, this was not smart. Nobody told us to bring our sandals for this. But we came to do this. So you get your feet all cut up and then you go in there. And of course, then your feet are cut up. What happens if you have cut up feet in salt water?
It heals faster.
It stings. It stings.
I guess you don't have to worry about sharks, though.
No, you don't have to worry about anything. In fact, the Dead Sea is one of the, in that sense, biologically pure water there is anywhere on the planet. There's no living organisms in it at all.
It's very, very blue.
It's extremely blue. It's what you call that toxic water blue. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. Like, if you find water in a lake or something somewhere that is just unbelievably turquoise blue, I mean, just the perfectest, beautifulest water you've ever seen, it's usually because it's toxic. Okay, the Dead Sea is just like that. Why? Because there's nothing living in it to discolor it. It's perfectly, beautifully blue. Okay, the Dead Sea is the same way. It is a gorgeous blue color. And like I said, it has beautiful salt crystals all over the place. I thought about bringing some back, but it was too hard. It was too hard. But I did bring you back a map to help you get a sense of the vertical relief of around, you can pass that around, of Israel, to just see kind of where the mountains are and where the valleys are. This is kind of helpful. There's a little one. The little one has Petra on it if you can find it. Now, it's like a little, like bonus 5 points if you can find Petra on that little bitty map.
So you can carry a rock back or a salt crystal or whatever from, they don't mind?
No. Like I said, the entire floor of the Dead Sea is covered in it. Now, interestingly enough, on the very south end of the Dead Sea, way down here, they actually mine it. There is actually a mine down there where they actually extract some of the valuable minerals. Because as I said, it's not just table salt. It's like magnesiums and other kinds of actual valuable minerals that they actually extract and sell commercially there at the Dead Sea. Interestingly enough. But there's the Dead Sea. This is the modern city of Eilat. You can see it's a nice little resort kind of thing. You got there's the king, his chair, that's Eilat. Eilat is way down here at the very tip of Israel. Petra over here, right along the main trading routes there.
And the geography is amazing.
Yep.
Didn't you say the Sea of Galilee is also below sea level?
Oh yeah, Sea of Galilee is way down there too. Not quite as far down as the Dead Sea because the water runs from the Sea of Galilee into the Dead Sea. But yeah, the Sea of Galilee is also way down in the hole. That whole Jordan River, the Jordan River and the Jordan River Valley is, a geologic subduction zone where basically the whole of the earth, just sinks way down in the hole. Yep. And there it is. Here's the Dead Sea one more time, and you can see all the white through the water? Those are the salt crystals deposited on the bottom. And they're beautiful crystals. They are truly, crystalline crystals.
Yes, it doesn't draw birds either. Because of all the salt, it doesn't draw any.
There's nothing for them to eat.
No, well, there's nothing to drink. If you drink the water or the birds drink the water, you'll die of dehydration or poisoned.
You must feel awful when you get out of it.
Again, nothing can live in there. No bacteria, no algae, no fish. You cannot live or drink water that is that briny.
But it's clear.
It's very.
It is very clear. Yep.
Something that brine.
Well, it's dissolved. It's in suspension. And like I said, the part that just absolutely cannot be in suspension crystallizes on the bottom. And how does that happen? You say, well, how can it be? Because you've got fresh water. The water that runs in there is fresh water. It runs from the Sea of Galilee down the River Jordan, and it is fresh water. Drinkable. You can just walk right up and drink it. You shouldn't do that because it's, not purified, but you can. It's fresh water. So it hits the Dead Sea, and it is ultra salty. Now, why would that be?
So it doesn't pick it up from the formations between.
It does. A little bit. Every drop takes a little bit, but the Dead Sea has no outlets. So the water flows in, and when it flows in, it brings a little tiny bit when it comes in. Then it is hot, hot, hot. 1,000 feet below sea level. H-O-T, hot, 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 desert down there. So what does the water do? It evaporates. When the water evaporates, what happens to the salt and the minerals? They stay there. So you're bringing water in, and water goes out, but the minerals and the salts that get brought in with that water stay. And over thousands of years, that process makes this super, 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 super salty because the water leaves, but the salts stay. So you're constantly bringing salt in, but the water is not staying. Okay, because when the water evaporates, the salts don't go with it.
Sea is shrinking too.
And the Dead Sea is shrinking because, again, we've dammed up the Jordan River to keep the water.
Farmed it.
Yeah, so that now there's even less water coming in. It's evaporating faster than the water runs in. So actually the Dead Sea is in net shrinking.
And one day, it will be nothing but a giant plain of salt.
Maybe. Letting the Dead Sea shrink to nothing is controversial in modern Israel. Okay? There are plenty of people that go, it's pretty much useless. Who cares if it goes away? Then there are other people that are like, hey, it's not right to let this major geographic feature just completely disappear. So it's controversial. But how would you keep the Dead Sea from shrinking and disappearing? You'd have to put water in it. They all live in the desert. Water is a valuable resource. So it's like, do you want to use your valuable resource to keep alive a useless lake?
Well, it's not completely useless.
In West Texas, they got
Yeah.
When you say shrinking, do you mean down or do you mean area-wise?
Both, right? Because basically the water's evaporating faster than it's coming in. So, it's a lake, so it's both, the level is going down and getting, it's shrinking down. So yeah, there's a couple of proposed solutions. One of the solutions is the Israelis could pump seawater into there. Okay, Israel borders the Mediterranean Sea. Yes? There's lots of water there. It's salt water. This is salt water. Just put a big old pump and pump it in there.
That may be even more salty than it already is.
No.
No. That's one solution. Another solution is, you could desalinate the Mediterranean Sea, use that for your water, and let the Jordan River go back to flowing in here naturally. Desalination is, of course, the most expensive water there is. So, you want to pay for that? Who wants to pay for that? Right? So, like any political question, just like the ones we have in our country, it's a complicated political question. Most people don't want to see the Dead Sea completely disappear. It's just an issue of how do you get to a sustainable place for it. But for the last several decades, it's been shrinking. It's been shrinking. Yep. Does that cover your statement, comment? Yeah. I myself, if it was me, I'm a proponent of just pump seawater in there. You put some screens and some filters and stuff, but you just generally pump the seawater in there. And then you could maintain it at a level that you want to put it in, which is still not free. You're still talking about pumping water, whatever it is, 100 miles.
below sea level. All you have to do is just
Siphon it?
dig a hole, just make it go downhill, and all you need is a valve.
Sort of. Sort of. Yes, sort of.
One of those questions.
Sure.
In Petra and here, you see animals and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought the desert had camels. I haven't seen a camel. Are they not there anymore?
Great question. I did not see any wild camels. I don't know anything about wild camels. Now, there are camels. There are people that have camels, and they raise their camels. But the thing about the camels is the camels cannot live in these super desolate places. Because a camel is a pretty large animal. If you think about a camel, it's like the size of a horse, or even maybe a little bigger than a horse. You got to feed your camel a fair amount. So the camels are mostly living back over, in the plains of Israel, where the farms are, where there's vegetation. So you take your camel and you ride through the desert, but you don't live in the desert with a camel. The only thing that you can get to live in the desert are some little bitty goats and maybe some little bitty sheep, are all that you can get to actually live out there. So there are camels around, but like I said, they're mostly not out in these super deserty parts. Yeah. And it's actually, to me, it's amazing that they didn't even get those goats to live. If you look, you could look around at these places that we've seen over the last few weeks, and how the Bedouin even feed their goats is amazing. Because, there's like nothing in most of these places.
You
most of the vegetation you see, the broom trees and other things, the only reason why they're there is because the goats won't eat them.
Yes.
I mean,
Anything
any
that-
other little vegetation that starts to grow, the people's goats eat it.
Yes. And a goat will eat almost I mean, for those of you that have goats, a goat will eat pretty much anything. Just about.
Just about. Just about.
Not anything, but just about. Just about. No. Thanks, Jason.
Not just eat, nothing except not even go.
Okay. That, believe it or not, is the end of what we had from Israel.
You didn't see Lot's wife.
You didn't take a picture of the pillar of salt?
No, I didn't go down to see Lot's wife.
Where's that at? Right near the Dead Sea.
It's near the Dead Sea.
It's flat, and there's nothing, and all of a sudden there's this pillar of salt. So they said that's.
That's tradition of.
That's
where-
tradition.
That's tradition, yes. When they ran. She looked back, that's where she.
Yeah,
But-
it's something that Charlton Heston used to put on these,
Do you have the map?
Yeah.
Who's got the map?
what
The map?
you know, biblical truths and stuff
Yes.
like that. He was saying, you know,
Pass
some
me the map.
scholars say there's no such thing as Sodom and all this. And
Oh no, those people don't know what they're talking about.
one of those historical things, they went and found these people that live in this area that aren't Christian, they're not Israel, you know, they're not Jews, and they have this pillar and they call it Lot's wife. You know, they knew the town was there, and you got all these historians going, no, it wasn't.
So the oldest known, archaeologically, oldest known city in the world is what? Does anybody know? Jericho. I don't know if you knew that or not. Jericho, to date, as of right now, is the oldest known city in the world. Right here on the edge of the Dead Sea. Sodom and Gomorrah and a whole host of other cities have been found. They know where they are. They all exist in this valley just to the south of the Dead Sea. Okay? Now, this is sort of my global warming infomercial. Okay? That area down there, there is absolutely nothing. It is completely desolate. Nothing grows. Nothing lives. No one is down there. No one. Okay? So why is it that all of the oldest cities in the world are all down here? Because it used to be lush with vegetation. Okay, that's where all the lush vegetation was. It wasn't up on top of these rocky mountains. This used to be the lush vegetation. Remember the story of Abraham and his nephew Lot? Where is it that Lot decided he wanted to go?
Green one.
He wanted to go down to the green, lush vegetation. Where's Sodom and Gomorrah? It's down in this valley where there is absolutely nothing.
Yeah, you wonder where the water is that.
Here's the deal. The reason there's nothing down there is because all of the soil has been ruined by salt. Okay, the entire area is ruinous with salt. But in antiquity, that was not so. What happened to cause all the salt to run down there? Nobody really knows why it turned the way it did. But we know that that's where all the cities were. Those cities, they're there. You can go, they're archaeologically there. You can find them. They're ancient. They're the oldest cities on earth. They're older than Mesopotamia. They're older than Egypt. They're older than China, India, anywhere. The oldest cities on earth are all right here, right around the Dead Sea. The people didn't live there because it was an inhospitable desert. Something changed.
The suburban leadership moved into
Yeah. Okay.
Well, at some point there, because we go south of the Dead Sea, you're starting back up the hill, because you have to get back up to sea level.
Yeah, down in a lot.
So there would have been water that ran down, that would have been fresh water on that side that no doubt
Supported all those
supported
cities.
all those cities.
Yes.
Stuff as the water rained down from the hills, the same thing. When it got to the Dead Sea, it would have been back in the Salt Sea.
Yep.
But, it'd be like Salt Lake City. The same thing. You have a Dead Sea, you have a Salt Sea there, but, the water comes down from the mountains and you can farm, and the Mormons went there, and, well, that would have been the same thing here. But, yeah, so the issue really is why does it look like that today? Because clearly the archaeology shows, just like
That's where all the people were.
that people live there. And it was lush. Yeah, Lot wanted to go there.
That was where they all wanted to go.
Yeah, that's,
They didn't want to go live up on the mountains where Abraham went. They wanted to go down in the lush, fertile valley. So something happened that caused all the soil to be completely ruined. It's so bad now that the Arab countries don't hardly grow anything at all. The Israelis figured out a way to do it despite the saltiness in like the 1960s, and they now grow a bunch of stuff down there. But it's a very sophisticated system. I think we talked about it a few months back, how the Israelis go about doing that. But anyway, they have figured out a way to farm in extremely salty soils. And essentially what it is if you go out and you plant a tree in a salty soil, you think, we're out in the desert, salty, I need to water my tree every day. You come by in the morning, you water your tree in the morning, you come back the next morning, you water it again, right? That's what you do. If you do that, in about 2 weeks, you're going to come back and you're going to have a dead tree. You're going to have a dead tree. Why? Because the tree is going to absorb through its roots all that salt in the salty soil, and the salt will kill it. Okay? So how then do you grow something in a salty soil? What the Israelis have figured out is using essentially the tiniest misters known to man. Instead of coming and watering the tree in the morning, every morning, you have to water the tree constantly. All the time. You never let it go dry. If you can keep it wet constantly all the time, the tree won't absorb the salt from the soil. The absorption of the salt happens when it dries out. So if you can keep it wet, now you can't keep it really wet. I mean, you know what happens to plants. If you overwater your plants, what happens to them? They rot, they mold, they die. But if you can control the moisture just right, and they have computer-controlled systems, basically, that keep these things just at the right amount of moisture to where they aren't drowning, but they don't dry out, you can grow things in the soil. And so the Israelis actually have vast farms and are turning it lush and green once again, the way it would have been in antiquity. But if you go over onto the other side, into the third world countryside, where they don't have that kind of farming technology, it is just absolutely barren desert, because you cannot grow anything using conventional farming methods in that soil. Interesting story. Interesting story. Okay.
Costs money. Costs money.
And you have to have...
And your enemies made it.
And you have to have money, and there's pride, and there's a lot of things going into all that.
You know, the princes don't want to spill out all that oil money.
All right. I have gone a little bit long. I apologize for that, but I wanted to get it done. Okie doke. So, let us close then in a word of prayer. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to gather, to talk a little bit about some of the places that we've been and some of the places that you've done a lot of your best work that we're able to read about in the Scriptures. We hope that this has been enlightening and faith enriching for all those involved. And we thank you, Lord, for all the blessings you've given us. And we ask that you watch over us this week and bring us back to this place again. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.